Welcome to Washed by the Word. I'm Pastor Kon, and I wanted to personally welcome you to our Sunday morning service as we go verse by verse through God's Word. It's our desire here by Washed by the Word that the Spirit of God will speak to you intimately as we go verse by verse through His Word. So welcome again to our Sunday morning service, and I look forward to hearing from all of you, sharing with us what God has shown you today as you get washed by the Word.
Well, good morning. Welcome to Washed by the Word. Glad you're all here with us this morning. You be hearing that? What that is? That's you? Calm yourself, Mr. C. Man. Nice. Mr. C has a little bit of AFib going on, so let's remember to pray for Mrs. C. Let's just pray for her now, in fact. Let's just pray. God, we do lift up Mrs. C to you, God. I pray that you would just continue to rest your hand on her. God, that this AFib would come under control, that you would just touch and heal that little body of hers. Pray for John Martinez too, Lord, with just the breathing stuff and all that's going on there. God, we thank you for him, and I ask, God, that you would just help these lungs just mellow out, that he can just get good air. God, we just place both of these folks in your hands. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, before we get going, I want to give a special welcome to Larry and Barb Schuler up from Minnesota. Good to see you guys. Some of you know Larry and Barb. They went to Israel with us, our last Israel trip. I've known Larry and Barb since probably 1974, I guess. Probably 74. Known them a long time. Those of you that play softball, this man can hit a softball. Big time. I don't know if you still can, but back in the day you could. I know that. I've seen it, but it's cool. Glad you guys are here. Glad you're here. All right, let's go. We're going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 18. We're going to just kind of walk through, as you know. We cover one or two chapters a Sunday mornings. We just kind of walk through the story of, I'm sorry? I can't hear you. What's that? I'm still not hearing you.
Israel classes today at 4:30.
You got it. Israel today at 4:30. Okay. Israel at 4:30 today. I need to get my eyes checked. I couldn't hear you. It's like... So Israel at 4:30 today. Israel at 4:30. All right. So we're going into 1 Samuel chapter 18. Last week, we looked at a well-known chapter, the account of David and Goliath and all. And if we take a look at chapter 17, verse 57, it says, Then, as David returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, Abner took David and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to David, Whose son are you, young man? Now, we remember David has been playing, we call it like a guitar, a stringed instrument for Saul prior to this. Remember when the Spirit of the Lord left Saul and a distressing spirit from the Lord came upon Saul and he would start flipping out. They went and got someone who could play a stringed instrument. David would go into the palace and he would play music for Saul, soothing Saul. And now Saul says, after this, he says, well, whose son are you, young man? Some believe, remember, that Saul didn't recognize him. Was it that David was playing behind a screen? Who knows? Or was it that he did recognize him? He just wanted to know, whose son are you? Because we remember one of the things was, if anybody kills Goliath, I'm going to give you my daughter. Whose son are you, young man? So who knows? But he asked him, and David said, well, I'm the son of your servant Jesse the Bethlehemite. Now, when he had finished speaking to Saul, we don't know what else was said there. There are many who believe that David shared his heart with Saul. We'll see why in just a minute. That David told him about how dare this uncircumcised Philistine stand up against the God of Israel. And I'm a shepherd boy who's been in the fields. As I've gotten older, I have become a young man who can take on lions and bears. with my sling because I serve a mighty God. And I don't care how big the enemy is, my God is bigger. And we can't help but remember Jonathan back in chapter 14. Remember when Jonathan, with his armor bearer, said, let's go up to that garrison and see what God might do, because God can give us a victory by many or by few. And we start to see the heart of Jonathan and the heart of David are very similar. Now, granted, most people believe that Jonathan's a little bit older than David. Some sources say 5 years, some say as much as 25 years. So there's an age difference here between David and Jonathan, but have you not found it in your own life? Age makes no difference if you both have a heart for God. And that's what we're going to see here as we get in these first 4 verses of chapter 18. We are going to see David and Jonathan get knit together. And I found it interesting as I was looking up words in this passage that the word friendship is never used to describe David and Jonathan, because theirs was much greater than just a friendship. We're going to see that their soul, their very being was knit together, and that they have a love for each other that is so strong because of their love for God. And how dare the liberal idiots even try to imply that this love between David and Jonathan somehow is biblical mandate for homosexual love. Don't you dare bring that garbage in here. That is baloney. God says by all means men should love each other, but men should not have sexual experiences with each other. That is an abomination to God. Now, I know that's not politically correct, and I'm proud to be not politically correct. Amen. Don't buy in to the lie from the very pit of hell. Don't buy into it. Don't buy into it. So this is David and Jonathan. We're going to see that they love each other. You better know they love each other. They have agape love because they love God. And they're put together. And there's going to be this bond, this love, that is going to surpass anything this world has to offer because of their love for God. So let's take a look in chapter 18, the first 4 verses. Now, when he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul, the nafesh, the very being of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. And you can't help but imagine that as David is explaining to Saul who he is and why he stood up to Goliath, that Jonathan, a warrior, a man's man with a heart for God, a real man. And as he stood there and listened to this young David taking the same stand that Jonathan had just taken years prior with the garrison of the Philistines, he realized, we have the same heart. I love this guy. Now, did Jonathan know that David had been anointed by Samuel? Many people believe he did. But let's take a look. The soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Saul took David that day, and he would not let him go home to his father's house anymore. David was no longer a shepherd, but he always had a shepherd's heart. He had been trained out in the fields of Bethlehem, and now he was going to become a shepherd of God's sheep. And now he's in training in the palace for a while. He'll be trained again in the battlefield. He'll be trained in the oasis of En-Gedi. He'll be trained on the run for a number of years as God continually trains his man. And Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Saul took him that day, would not let him go home to his father's house anymore. Then Jonathan and David, so now they're in the palace together, they made a covenant because Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Check this out. And Jonathan took off the robe that was on him. So, because he's the crown prince, you see, he is next in line to be king of Israel from a human perspective. And he takes off that robe of the crown prince that was on him, and he gave it to David. Not only the robe, but with his armor, even to his sword and his bow and his belt. Remember when Saul tried to give David his armor? And David said, that doesn't fit. Saul's big. Obviously, Jonathan and David were both the same size, but more importantly, they had that same heart. And as Jonathan takes off his robe and his armor and gives it to David, he's saying more than, here, wear this. This should fit you. He is recognizing the fact that, David, you're the next king of Israel. It's not me. Only a man of God could do something like that. Only a man whose heart is fixed on God, not on his own position, his own possessions, but on what God's will is. He saw in David the call of God on his life. And Jonathan was willing to say, let me help you with this. I will bring you up. I will train you up for what God has called you to do. And David, very wisely, we're going to see, look at the life of David. Didn't push it. He had every opportunity to take Saul out and to be the king. He says, no, in God's time, God knows when. I will be faithful to do what God has called me to do right now, and in God's time, I'll be ready. And this godly young man, Jonathan, can you imagine? You're in line to be the king. You're the crown prince. They were so much alike. They were both bold. They were both men who had great trust in God. They were men of action, but most importantly, both of them had a real relationship with the Lord. Now, they were very different. Jonathan was the oldest son of the king, crown prince. David was the youngest son of a shepherd with no money at all. But they had a bond because of their love for God. Much more than a friendship. Much more than a bro. Much more than I got your back. No, they had a love for God. And just as the same principle holds true in a marriage, where the closer you get to the Lord and the closer two people get to the Lord, the closer they get to each other. The same is true with a relationship like a Jonathan and David. In Proverbs 18:24, you don't have to turn there, you can just jot it down, but it talks about there is a friend who is closer than a brother. Jonathan and David had that. And what made it that way is because of their love for the Lord. It was their love for the Lord that got them so close. And throughout their life, we're going to see they've got a friendship that, it's not even a friendship, it's way closer than a friendship. It's a supernatural bond. And I pray that everyone in this room has that with somebody. A friendship that is based solely on your love for the Lord. Someone that you can call and say, pray for me. If not, find one. Find someone who loves Jesus more than you and say, man, I want to get to know you. Because I see your love for Jesus, and I love Jesus, and I think together we could really do some dynamite things for the Lord. Find that. Find that. Guys, find it with guys. Ladies, find it with ladies. Husbands, you better have that with your wife. And wives, have that with your husbands. But look for those types of relationships. It's an amazing, amazing thing. We're going to see as we go through this chapter 18, Saul's fear of David is going to grow and grow and grow. And yet Jonathan's love and commitment to their relationship is going to grow and grow and grow. Saul has nothing to lose. Jonathan has everything to lose. But because Jonathan's eyes are on the Lord, not on his position, Jonathan goes down in history as this godly man. We've seen Samuel tell Saul, the Lord's taking your kingdom from you, giving to someone better than you, a man after God's own heart. We're going to see now over the next number of chapters, Saul trying to hang on to something that God has taken from him. That would be a mistake of gigantic proportion. So we'll be watching that. We'll be watching that. So he gives him his stuff. Notice verse 5. It's an interesting thing. So David went out wherever Saul sent him. Think about that. David's been anointed, remember, with the horn, the olive oil? He's been anointed the king of Israel. David has just killed the giant of the Philistines that the entire Israeli army was freaking out over. And now he comes under the authority of Saul. If he would not have had his eyes on the Lord, you know. Excuse me, Saul, you want me to go where? Do you know what I just did? Do you know what my future is? I'm taking your spot, big guy. But that's not the heart of David. A man after God's own heart, what does he do? So David went out wherever Saul sent him. He understood the principle of coming under the authority of the person over him. Oh, the peace we have. Those of us that are working and you have employers. The peace and success we will have when we come under the authority that God has placed over us. If we understand that our whole sole purpose at being at work is twofold, to shine for Jesus and to make our supervisor, our boss, successful. If we can grab those two principles, you will have peace. I'm not going to say you're going to get a raise. I'm not going to say that you're going to be the boss one day. I'm going to say you're going to have peace and you're going to bring God glory. We talk about our boss. We steal from our boss by showing up to work just 5 minutes late. We steal from our boss from taking some notepads or some ink, or that's not bringing glory to the Lord. That is wrong. If you sit here today and say, oh man, I'm guilty, here's what you do. You go to your boss and you say, you know, I've been convicted this weekend of some of the things I've been doing. I show up to work 10 minutes late almost every day. And I've been doing that for 3 years. So I'm going to work the next 2 months free of charge because I've stole that from you. I'm serious. I've been stealing time from you. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to work free. Please don't pay me for the next 3 months. Pray about it. Or if you stole other things, just pay it back. Pay it back. Get right. Get right. Do right. Anybody here the boss of your business? Anybody? Okay, Santi, there you are. If someone came to you and said that, would you fire them? Nice and loud, what would you do?
No, I appreciate what they did. I would encourage them for their transparency. Forgive them.
So you'd pay them anyway? Yeah, probably. Most bosses would. Most bosses would. But if you have a boss that says, great, 3 months, this is awesome. Okay, that's what it is. If that's the problem, just talk to somebody. God's got you. Don't worry. Do what's right and watch what God will do. Do what's right. Okay, let's keep going. So David went out wherever Saul sent him. And notice this next word. This is a pretty cool word here. It says, behaved wisely. Now in the Hebrew, there's a word for that. It says David, and the word is, I'm not going to pronounce this Hebrew word right. If you want it right, call Lee. But I'm going to pronounce it Sakal. S-A-K-A-L. I'm going to say Sakal a lot. And this is going to be probably my next Didachi instead of Didache. So Sakal, because I'm going to say Sakal probably 30 times today. Now, if it's pronounced incorrectly, you know what it is. It's S-A-K-A-L. David's Sakal. And it means that he behaved wisely. And in the Hebrew, it's an interesting word, guys, because it means literally to be successful. To be successful by paying attention to what we do. That's part of it. It means to be successful by thinking through the situation before we act and then making a wise decision. That's Sakal. So Sakal is paying attention to what we do. When confronted with a situation, think it through and make the wise decision. And thirdly, Sakal has in it having the presence of the Spirit of God in a life that is guiding us, leading us. That's Sakal. It's having God's presence in our life, thinking through this decision we're faced with, and paying attention to what it is we're doing. Sakal. In English, here in this Bible, it was translated to behave wisely. So now it says, David went out wherever Saul sent him, and he sekal. He worked hard to be a blessing to his boss, to Saul. He would not undercut Saul's position or authority in any way, we're going to see. And throughout the book of 1 Samuel, David continually practices sekal. Behaving wisely, behaving wisely, behaving wisely, behaving wisely. Take a look at what it says. And Saul set him over the men of war. Now, wait a minute. David's young. Some say he's young as 18. Some say 22, 23. How old are you, James? 24? Who's 23? Tito? 23? 22? So Tito, James, at the oldest. We got anybody 18 in here or close to 18? There you go. Stand up, James. You guys. So he's somewhere in this age right here. Okay, got it? Thanks. So these are the age. Now remember what went on when David went to the battlefield to see how his older brothers were doing, and Goliath came out thumping his chest and threatening everybody. And remember what David's older brother Eliab said? How about those few sheep you're watching? Who's watching them? You just came. I know your heart, David. You just, he's a big brother. Can you imagine? Guess who his general is? All of a sudden, someone like this is over the Israeli army. I wonder, what happens when Eliab ran into David. How's it going? How's the salute, please? Okay. No, I'm not sure. But you get the picture. It's like, hello, that's kind of crazy right there. So he sets David over the men of war. And what's amazing is this young kid was accepted in the sight of all the people. And also in the sight of Saul's servants, which are the leaders of the nation at that point. So God gives David favor. It's amazing what God can do with one person who will sekal, who will behave wisely, who will come to the authority that God has placed him under. Recognize that God has anointed that person. Act wisely and accept God's will and his ability to fulfill the calling God has on him. And God gives David favor in front of the whole nation. Now it happened as they were coming home, and this appears to be coming home from this battle with Goliath. So here they come. When David was returning from the slaughter of the Philistine, that the women had come out of some of the cities of Israel. Doesn't say that. What's it say? All the city. Remember what all means? Alas, remember? In the Septuagint, it's alas. It means all. All the cities. Everybody. You can imagine. Goliath is sitting there throwing all these insults at the God of Israel, and everyone's freaking out, and this young guy comes up and drops him. And now he's coming in with Saul. Oh, yeah. Everybody's coming to see this guy. So here they are. Probably one of the first ticker tape history right there. And the woman had come out of all the cities of Israel singing and dancing to meet King Saul with tambourines, with joy, with musical instruments. So the women sang as they danced and said, and here we see why they're really there. They say, Saul has slain his thousands. And you can imagine Saul when he hears that. That's right. And let's go to the second verse. It's not the same as the first. It's a little bit longer. It's a little bit worse. They sing, and David has slain his tens of thousands. Saul's hanging on the best he can to his position. And all of a sudden, it turns. Then Saul was very angry. His approval rating just dropped through the floor in his mind. And the saying displeased him. And he said, well, they've ascribed to David 10,000s. To me, they've ascribed only thousands. Now what more can he have but the kingdom? Well, yeah, he's getting that kingdom, Saul. Hello. Samuel already told you that. So Saul eyed David from that day forward. He wanted his throne. And it happened on the next day that the distressing spirit from God came upon Saul again. Here it goes. The next day, God puts that spirit on him again, and he prophesied inside the house. Now, the word prophesied in Hebrew, interesting word. It can mean speaking on behalf of God, but in Hebrew, the Hebrew word can also mean speaking out of your mind, based on context. Those of you that are in lit class and those of you who are not in lit class. Those of you who are in lift class and those of you who are not in lift class. What do you think from the context? A distressing spirit from the Lord came upon Saul and he prophesied. Do you think he's going to be speaking for God or do you think he's going to be speaking crazy? Crazy. So you don't even need to come to lit. You know that stuff. Of course. So here's Saul in the house, in quote, prophesying. So David played music with his hand, as at other times. And there was a spear in Saul's hand, and Saul cast the spear. For he said, I'm going to pin David to the wall. He wanted to make sure that David would not be that king. He wanted to make certain that David got the point, literally. I'll pin David to the wall. But David escaped his presence twice. So much for the saying, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on, no. Hit me upside the head once, hit me upside again, and again. Jesus said what? 490 times, basically. So David, he's playing the music with those same hands that killed Goliath, with those same hands that were holding the head of Goliath. Now he sweetly is playing music to a very troubled king that is over him. Interesting. David was famous. They were writing songs about him. Women were looking at him. And yet David quietly ministers sounds of healing to Saul, doing what God has called him to do. In David's hand, a harp, a guitar, an instrument of worship. In Saul's hand, a spear, an instrument of war. In David's hand, an instrument of healing. In Saul's hand, an instrument of hurt. And Saul takes the spear, he tries to nail David. David steps aside. Now, right there, I'm just saying me. In our lit classes, we talk about reading the word, remember, getting into the text. So I was doing that this week. And I was playing David. It was really fun. Not David. I could actually play an instrument. It was cool. So I'm playing that instrument. And I'm there, and I hear Saul just talking out of his mind. And he's sitting there. He's the king. He's my boss. He's got that spear. And all of a sudden, here comes that spear right at my head. I just move aside. Just sitting there. Obviously, David pulled it out. Handed it back to him. Can you imagine? I don't know if I'd have done that. Honestly, I don't know if I would have. As I was thinking about it, I was thinking, really? I kill Goliath? I'm the anointed king? The thought crossed my mind. He gave it back to him. Saul did it again. And then it says, but David escaped his presence twice. He walked away. He walked away. Both Saul and David were leaders. A couple of leaders here. Both were anointed. We saw Saul get anointed by Samuel. David's been anointed by Samuel. Both were called. We saw Saul get called. We see David getting called. But one was on the way up, and one was on the way down. Every one of us have been called to serve. And every one of us is either going up or down. Do you want to know what you're doing? Look at your hand, what's in it. Is it an instrument of hurt or an instrument of healing? If we're going down further away from the Lord, then we use our mouth to hurt people and cut other people and hurt people. We throw spears all day long. And if I don't have enough guts to say it to you, then I'll say it to someone else about you. That just means I'm further away from the Lord than I was yesterday. I'm going down. But if I'm using words of healing, I'm going on up. Successful leadership is not intimidated by people around them or under their authority, not intimidated by them, but doing everything they can to raise them up. Not because they're related, but because they're called and gifted. We raise up. We speak words of healing one to another, not words of hurt. Words of healing. One of the signs of drifting away from the Lord is we start to hurt rather than to heal. We start to go to war with people rather than worshiping the Lord. We get our eyes off of the Lord onto the circumstances, onto people. Notice that David didn't throw back. Interesting, a guy by the name of Gene Edwards in a book called The Tale of Three Kings. I'm just going to read this. Interesting. He talked about returning the thrown spear. Someone throws a spear at you, just throw it back. You get hit back harder. Be a man. He talks about it. It's written here. Listen to it. I'm going to quote him. In doing this small feat of returning thrown spears, you will prove many things. You will prove that you're courageous. You stand for what is right. You boldly stand against the wrong. You prove by throwing the spear back that you are tough and you can't be pushed around. You will not stand for injustice or unfair treatment. You're a defender of the faith, the keeper of the flame, the detector of all heresy. You will not be wronged. All these attributes then combine to prove you that you are obviously a candidate for kingship. Yes, perhaps you are the Lord's anointed, after the order of King Saul. Not David, but Saul. That is not what a Christian does. When a spear is thrown at us, we return it gently. And we continue to do what God has called us to do. Another spear is thrown, we don't fight back. We don't defend ourselves. We let God be our defense. If we choose to defend ourselves, God will let us. He will. If you choose not to defend yourself, God will be your defense. And we're going to see it in the life of David, played out for us over the next number of weeks. It's one of the most beautiful accounts in all of Scripture. Watching the heart of David, behaving wisely. Now, Saul was afraid of David. That's just crazy. Saul's got the throne, Saul's got the army, he's got the spears. But he's afraid of David. Why? Because the Lord was with him. The Lord had departed from Saul. Therefore Saul removed David from his presence and made him his captain over 1,000. David, you're out of the palace, man. You're going to the battlefield. You be captain. You're going to be the head guy. You go out and fight Philistines. Why do you suppose he'd want him to go out and fight Philistines? Any idea? What's that? Sure, he could get killed out there. Philistine spears are just as sharp as Saul's. There's just more of them. So I'm going to put you out. You're over these 1,000 guys, David, go do your thing. And it says, and David went out and came in before the people. That word in the Hebrew, guys, it means going out and coming in is a military term, and it means that he went out and successfully had campaigns and then would come back in victorious. That's the phrase they use. So it says, he said, you're the captain over the 1,000. David went out and came in before the people. Notice verse 14. And David behaved wisely. There's that word again. There it is again. That's Sekal. In all of his ways. Everything David did worked. Don't you hate it when that happens? If you're backslid and you got some Christian dude around you, and it's like, oh, I got to just get him fired. I'm going to transfer him. So you transfer him, and he becomes the boss over there of a bigger firm than you got, and now he's hiring you. What? No. No. Sekal. David's Sekal. And David behaved wisely in all of his ways, and the Lord was with him. Therefore, when Saul saw that he behaved very wisely, he was afraid of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David because he went out and he came in before them. He conducted successful military operations against the Philistines over and over and over and over and over and over again. He was undefeated, and people loved it. And David's getting all the acclaim. And Saul is freaking out. So we saw David's Sekal. Now we're going to take a look at Saul. When you go to Spain, they have these little places where you can go get like a dessert, appetizer, little bar. Just little food. They're called tapas. Do we have them in Mexico too? Tapa bars? Okay. When I used to take the kids to Spain, that was awesome because it was cheap, inexpensive, and it was fun. And we go to tapa bars. And they're bars, not like drinking bars or food bars, but it's fantastic. Little tapa bars. T-A-P-A, I'm assuming. In Hebrew, there's a T-A-P-A, tapa, but then plural, tapas, or tapas. Doesn't mean food in Hebrew. That's Spanish. In Hebrew, tapas means to manipulate. That's what Saul is doing here. We're going to start seeing the difference between Saul, who is freaking out over David, and David, who's not freaking out over Saul. We see Saul over and over and over doing what he's supposed to be doing, and then we see Saul and his tapas. Not tapas, tapas is how it's pronounced. His manipulation. Manipulation, as you know, the tapas in Hebrew, the very word in Hebrew, tapas, is defined like this: something that is done secretively. I put sneaky up there. You manipulate, kind of sneaky. You maneuver people and events for a hidden agenda for your own good. That's manipulation. That's tapas. That's what Saul is doing. First he tries fear, doesn't work. I'm going to promote you. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put you head of the army, front line. You lead the charge, David. But you see, manipulation. And it might be seen as, boy, you're pretty crafty in the world's eyes. Maybe you're even considered smart in the world's eyes. But manipulation is never blessed by God. Trying to manipulate people and things to get what we want will never be blessed by God. And that is going to be the theme going forward in 1 Samuel. David just comes under his authority, behaves wisely, and allows God to do what God is going to do in God's timing. He's going to be faithful right where he's at. Saul is going to continue to manipulate, we're going to see all the way through now. And it just ends up a nightmare for him. Saul's jealousy of David caused him to use tapas. In verse 17 to the rest of the chapter, he really gets into it now. Now, David, it says, remember in verse 14, behave wisely in all of his ways. That is really something. It's one thing to behave wisely when you got a Christian boss, isn't it? David behaved wisely while his authority is throwing spears at him, trying to take him out. Then when God stops that, he says, well, then I'm going to put you out of the palace. It's really nice here for sure. You go out in the desert and fight Philistines. David has some powerful and determined enemies. And yet he continued to behave wisely. Verse 17, we start to see more manipulation. Then Saul said to David, here's my older daughter, Merab. I will give her to you as a wife. Remember, Saul had said, if anybody kills this giant, you get tax exemption, and you get my daughter to marry. He says, here's my older daughter, Merab. I'll give her to you as wife. Only be valiant for me and fight the Lord's battles. In other words, you can have her, but you got to fight. You go out and prove yourself. For Saul thought, let my hand not be against David, but let the hand of the Philistines be against him. So we see the manipulation going on again. So David said to Saul, who am I, and what is my life or my father's family in Israel that I should be a son-in-law to the king? The king, any man who had a daughter, the man coming to the daughter had to show that he was worthy of marrying the daughter by almost like paying a dowry. Not getting a dowry, but paying a dowry in Hebrew time. And David says, my dad didn't have much, I don't have much, I'm just a farm boy. I can't be how am I going to be the son-in-law of a king? I don't have it. But it happened at the time when Merab, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David, that Saul gave her to Adriel, the Maholathite, as a wife. So here you are, here's your wife, never mind, just playing, and give her to, can you imagine? Now, I'm going to pronounce this girl's name, I could say Michal or something, I'm going to say Michael. Since you remember in Santa Fe, when we were in church there, we had Michael Leonard there. Ma Walton, she went to our church. And she went by Michael, so I'm going to go by Michael. Her son was our drummer, Chris Donat. And his mom would come, and it was really weird having Ma Walton. Those of you that are young don't know what that is, but how about the old folks? Anybody know Ma Walton? Look at her around. Put them up. Look around, young people. Put them up. Look around. That was a very well-known TV show. She was like major. But young people, who doesn't know who Ma Walton is? Don't you just feel old, guys? You just feel old right now? It's like, but at any rate, there she was. But at any rate, her name was Michael. So we're going to say Michael. So now Michael, Saul's daughter, she loved David. But you know what's really sad? Who wouldn't love David at this point? I mean, he had great character, great qualities, good looking, famous, could play the guitar. Who wouldn't love him? He could serenade her, walk down the streets, people say, that's David. Who's that with David? I don't know, but she's lucky. What we are going to see is that Michael was never attracted to the heart of David that loved God so desperately. Her brother Jonathan was. We're going to find that Michael wasn't. Michael loved David because he was so superficially amazing. But she didn't get to know his heart. They're going to get married. Saul's going to try and take David out. Michael's going to rescue David, deceive her dad, and protect him. David's going to be out on the run for a long time. While he's gone, Saul's going to take Michael and give her to another man. She's going to marry some other guy. David's going to become king eventually. When he does, he's going to say, where's my wife? Well, she married him now. No. He goes and takes Michael, and her second husband is going to be walking behind in sackcloth and ashes, begging, don't take my wife. The guy's heart's got to be broken. David takes her. You're my wife. David brings the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, remember? He's fired up. Man, I'm bringing the Ark of the Covenant. The presence of God is going to Jerusalem. God had told us to do that. It's amazing. He says it's like the capital of Israel is now Jerusalem. Wait a minute, that's a good thing. And there it is. And he brings the very presence of God into Jerusalem. And David is dancing, man. He is dancing. He's wearing his little skirt. And he's dancing. And Michael looks out. He says, oh, look at you. Aren't you all kingly now? Jumping around like you're crazy. You should be ashamed of yourself. And he says, woman, you don't even know. I'm going to worship God. Michael never had a heart for the Lord. Oh, she loved David as much as she could love David. We said before, the problem with marrying an unbeliever is you will never get agape love. You'll get friendship love. You'll get sexual love, eros and phileo love for sure. You'll never get agape love. And that's what your heart is craving in a relationship. And you marry an unbeliever, that unbeliever cannot give you agape love because that's a fruit of the Spirit. You cannot manufacture it. It comes from God flowing through you. And if your partner does not know the Lord, they don't get to share agape love with you. And you will have a David-Michael relationship at best. Eventually, Michael is set aside. She dies childless. No kids. Which is not a surprise because if the firstborn of David would have been with her, that would have brought Saul's lineage right into the Messianic line. Which would have been interesting, but didn't happen. So we look at Michal. She loved David the best she could. And they told Saul, and the thing pleased Saul. So Saul said, I'm going to give her to him, that she may be a snare to him. Manipulation. That the hand of the Philistines may be against him. Therefore Saul said to David, second time, you're going to be my son-in-law today. And Saul commanded his servants, communicate with David secretly, manipulation, and say, hey, look, the king has delight in you and all his servants love you. Now, therefore, become the son-in-law. Or the king's son-in-law. So Saul's servants spoke those words in the hearing of David. And David said, does it seem to you a light thing to be a king's son-in-law, seeing I am poor and lightly esteemed man? And the servants of Saul told him, saying, in this manner David spoke. Then Saul said, thus you shall say to David, the king does not desire any dowry. Forget, you don't need the dowry. Just give me 100 foreskins of the Philistines to take vengeance on the king's enemies. That means Saul's got to kill 100 guys. Not only that, do you think David would be marked even more? He's already a giant killer in them. He's already the leader. Now, from a Philistine's point of view, he is desecrating their bodies. So Saul is just all in on marking David. But Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. So when his servants told David these words, David said, seriously, that's it? That's fantastic. Really? It pleased David well to become the king's son-in-law. Now the days had not expired. Therefore David arose, he went, he and his men, he killed not 100, but 200 men of the Philistines. I love that. When your authority tells you to do something that's very unreasonable, do to the best of your ability, and then more. Not complaining, just do it. My dad used to, when he's a little young guy, he was working at Cox's Bakery. I've heard this story so many times, and I'm thinking of you right now, Rhonda, because you talked about peeling potatoes yesterday, 50 pounds of potatoes. When you said that, I went ding, 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 because my dad used to talk about that as I was growing up. When I was a kid, I worked at Cox's Bakery, you know. And he said, I was working hard in my first job, not just a kid working, I was just working at this bakery, just working. And I worked hard and I got done, and the boss was just kind of different guy, he said, and I was working and closed up at 9 o'clock, and I was getting everything ready to go because I had school the next day, but I was just working, get it done, and closing time was coming up at 9 o'clock, and I got the place good, and the boss said, did you peel your potatoes, Carmen? I said, potatoes? What are you talking about, potatoes? So you got to peel 100 pounds of potatoes for tomorrow. What now? Well, yeah, you're supposed to, when you have time off, peel those potatoes. He didn't know, so he was there like 2 in the morning peeling potatoes. When you said that, I thought of that. But it was one of those things where the boss tells you to do something, do it more. with a great attitude? I want you to dust the furniture over there in the waiting room. Yes, sir, glad to do that. Don't, my job description is not about no dust and no furniture. No, just dust the furniture. Do it. And then wash the windows too. And take out the garbage. Anybody have any employees? Anybody have an employee here? How do you feel if they go beyond what you ask them to do? Are you okay with that? You're okay with that? Just do it. Just do it. Just do it. David goes beyond. 100 foreskins? How about 200 foreskins? The whole thought of that is just ridiculous, but hey, there it is. That's what the Bible says. They did that. And David brought their foreskins, and they gave them in full count to the king. 1, 2, 3. Can you imagine? That he might become the king's son-in-law. Then Saul gave Michal his daughter his wife. Thus Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David. He says, man, 100 Philistines, 200 Philistines didn't kill him. God's all over this guy. And that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him. And Saul was still more afraid of David. All of Saul's plans are coming down on Saul. It's just not working. If God is for us, David wrote a psalm. We call it Psalm 10. Take a look at this. We don't know when he wrote it, but I find the one verse, Psalm 10, interesting in it, in light of this period of David's life. Psalm 10. Take a look at this. It's just kind of interesting. Psalm 10, verse 2. Remember, David just said, I got nothing. I'm poor. Look at this. The wicked in his pride persecutes the poor. Let them be caught in the plots. The word plots right there, guess what it is? Tapos. The manipulation. Let them be caught in the manipulation which they have devised. That's interesting in light of what he's gone through way at the early time of his life here. He was still more afraid of David, it says in 1 Samuel 18. So Saul became David's enemy continually. Notice it wasn't that David became Saul's, or that Saul became David's enemy. It was Saul became David's enemy continually. Then the princes of the Philistines went out to war. And so it was, whenever they went out, that David, here it is again, he's doing it again, behaved more wisely than all the servants of Saul. Three times he behaves more wisely. Verse 5, verse 14, and here in verse 30. So that his name became highly esteemed. David was careful what he did. He thought things through, and he let God lead him. And he was successful. In closing, I want us to turn to Colossians chapter 4. Colossians chapter 4. In Colossians chapter 4, we see this one little verse, but in light of David's response here to Saul and the situation that he's in, it's interesting as we look at chapter 4 of Colossians, verse 5. Paul's writing to the church up in Colossae up there, and he says, walk in wisdom. Behave wisely, in other words. Walk in wisdom toward those who are outside, to the unbelievers. Redeeming the time. Let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt. Make them thirsty for the things of God, that you may know how you ought to answer each one. This mind, this heart that was in David, we see this humility of David coming under the authority of David, doing things wisely in David. In Philippians chapter 2, it says that was the same heart that was in Jesus. And here in Colossians, God wants this mind, this heart, to be in each of us. So this week as we head out, may we each behave wisely. Not reacting, but really considering and thinking through each door that's placed before us. May we consider the consequences of wrong behavior. May we consider the blessings of obedient behavior. May we think things through. May we take it to the Lord and seek Him and allow Him to open a door that no man can close and to close a door that no man can open. Let Him do that. If you're truly part of the Church of Philadelphia, you know from our Revelation study the last couple of weeks, if you're part of the Church of Philadelphia, a true believer, God's got you. Let's behave wisely. May God bless you. May He give each of us wisdom. May the Spirit of God, the presence of God be so evident on your life. May we get right with those who are in authority over us. If we have been doing things at work that we shouldn't have been, may we get right. May we get right and walk clean with the authorities that God has placed in our life. Let's just be cleaned up and watch what God will do. May you enjoy the favor that God will give you. So, Lord, thank you again just for this time to get together to worship you. Thank you for a sweet time of worship. God, thank you for your word and what we can learn from it as we just read through the life of David. God, I pray that you would help us to truly be people who behave wisely. Lord, guard us from feeling that we need to manipulate a situation to get our own desires accomplished. God, forgive us for being master manipulators sometime. God, help us to trust you, to behave wisely and to trust you. As we gather next door, Lord, for fellowship and some food, we thank you for the food that has been provided and prepared today. We ask, God, you bless it, that you'd be pleased with our conversation. Pray for James tonight, God, that you would speak to us through him. God, I pray that you would draw us back together tonight as we worship you, as we remember you with our communion this evening. And as we look at Paul going through Thessalonica and Berea, going down to Athens, God, I pray that you would speak to us. Lord, that we be quick to receive your word with all readiness and then go home and make certain that what we are taught in each service here, that washed by the word, lines up with your scriptures, that we would truly be Bereans. In Jesus' name, amen.